Enjoy with your headphones for a better listening experience.
Please watch till the end of the video to have you most scariest part of the video.
People of Reddit, what was the moment you felt like you were in danger? I was walking home from a gas station at like 1 or 2 in the morning. Man follows me out. I cross the street. Man crosses the street. I cross the street again. Man crosses the street again. Mind you, this is all on the same block. It makes zero sense to cross back and forth like that. So, I look back and he is staring at me with his hands in his jacket pockets. I pulled out my phone and pretended to start talking to someone. He goes, "Oh, you don't need that." I respond with, "Yeah, I think I might." Then he turns in the opposite direction and walks away. Maybe it was harmless, but this was in Savannah, Georgia, and I did not feel safe.
I was the only sober guy at a wedding reception out in the middle of nowhere. My girlfriend took me because it was her friend's wedding. She got drunk and loudly broke up with me, then left me there. She was mad because I asked her to go back to where we were staying because someone was trying to start trouble with me. Now I'm surrounded by drunken hicks who didn't like me, more than 100 miles from home, and on foot. The guy who was making trouble kept trying to get me to walk away into the darkness to talk with 3 other people next to him. Nope. I'm not getting jumped or put into a situation where I need medical help in a place where I'd lay injured and ignored. A few weeks later, she tried to reach out to me to see if we could work things out. A few days ago, my smoke detector started beeping while I was in the shower. That noise, and what it might mean, is scary enough, but being in the shower made me terrifyingly vulnerable. The beeping stopped after I shut off the water and threw a towel around myself, but I still had to investigate while cold, wet, and trembling. False alarm. Probably an ant crawling across the sensor, which has happened once before. When I was watching 4 lanes of traffic coming at me at 70 miles an hour. Luckily, it was a brief moment of danger, but it was a life flashing before your eyes kind of moment. I had just gotten onto a highway and was changing lanes when the Suburban I was driving hydroplaned. Apparently that morning's rain created puddles or slicked the tarmac or something. Regardless, the Suburban began to spin clockwise. Through my windshield I could see the world outside rotating, eventually to 180 degrees where traffic was now coming directly at me. No joke, I thought I was going to die. The Suburban, thankfully, kept spinning around and back to its original position. The tires regained purchase with road, and it carried on as though none of the last terrifying few seconds ever happened. I'm not sure I blinked the rest of the ride home and I kept a white-knuckle grip on the wheel. I was really, really lucky.
At a resort in Mexico, my husband was out in the evening with his folks. I decided to relax and ordered room service and a bottle of wine. A couple of hours later, the doorknob of the connecting door to our room, which was locked, started to turn. Then the person started to knock, then throwing himself against the door trying to get through. This was before cell phones became popular, so I couldn't get a hold of my husband. I kept the wine opener in my hand just in case and called the front desk. They came up half an hour later and said there was no one in the other room and everything was okay. My husband stayed by my side for the rest of the vacation. This was about 16 years ago.
Years ago, we had this wireless doorbell that rang with even a gentle breeze. So, when it went off at 2 a.m., I assumed it was just the wind. I peeked out of my son's bedroom window, which faces the front door, and saw this guy standing there with a hood pulled up over his head. He rang the doorbell again and then started to try to go around to our backyard. I got my wife to call 911 and take our son to our room and grab the best weapon I could find at the time, a hammer. The guy came back to the front and began pounding on our door. Then he saw me peeking out through the blinds and came to the window. He began hitting the window so hard that I thought it would shatter while ordering me to let him in. I told him that we had already called the police, but he didn't stop. It was at that point that I realized that, if I turned the hammer to the claw side, I could inflict more damage to his skull should he get in. The police showed up and he fled. They cornered him down the block. Apparently, he was just a very drunk college student who thought he was at his friend's house. That was a few blocks away on a different street and across a major road. He sobered up quickly when confronted with a few large German Shepherd police dogs. An officer drove me in his car to identify the student. I stayed in the car so he couldn't see me, but I could see him. I declined to press any charges and they gave him a ride to his friend's house. It still amazes me the mindset that I got in when I thought he was going to break his way into my house. I'm a quite easygoing, non-violent kind of guy and I've always wondered if I'd have what it takes to defend myself and my loved ones. To be really honest, at that moment my concern was for my wife and my young son in the other room. I felt like my life was in danger too, but that wasn't important, and I was ready to put myself in front of the danger if it stopped it from reaching them. I will tell one of mine from my teenage years, still remember it vividly. When I was in high school, during the traditional gun deer hunt, I'd go walk the woods with my friend and his family. I can't recall the exact year this happened, but I didn't recognize one of the vehicles at the farm. I found out it belonged to some folks I knew, whose son had a slight learning disability. I only mention this because it will become important. I tell my friend, hey I know, let's call him Sean, and he's a really good kid, but I don't think he should walk without his dad or another hunter. He has an issue with impulse control, and he doesn't always understand things the best. I'm just concerned. I was basically told I was overthinking and so I conceded thinking maybe I was the AH. About a half hour later we were all walking in a line through the woods. We yelled to one another to stay in line when we could not see each other as we were spaced out 50 to 100 yards each. Sean was above me on the hill, and my friend's younger brother, we will call him D, was below me. Things were quiet and I hadn't heard any shooting. I hadn't heard from Sean the last few times I yelled, but I was assured the hunter on the other side of him would always have a visual on him. And D was responding to me, and I heard others, so I was hopeful we were all still in line. It's a safety issue to get too far ahead or behind. As I approached a thick area of thorn bushes, I saw a large dead branch. I stepped heavily on it to crack it hoping it would kick up a deer. It definitely got results, just not what I wanted. Bang! I felt the heat of the 12-gauge slug as it passed within inches of my head, hitting a tree a few feet in front of me, splintering the wood and flinging it in all directions. Before I could react I heard another whistling sound past my other ear, followed by the bang of another shot. I dove to the ground and began crawling to get behind a big oak about 20 yards ahead as the shots were still ringing over me. I was yelling stop stop stop, stop ducking shooting. Finally, it stopped, and I heard someone running towards me, and out popped Sean. I got one. I got one. He yelled as he ran into the clearing where I had been. I was enraged to say the least. He was smarter than this, he was highly intelligent, but sometimes, like mentioned earlier, he didn't get the logic behind the facts, like the ones he had learned about hunter safety. What the F***K are you doing, Sean? You could have killed me. I heard a deer, so I started shooting at it. Do you think I got it? Did you see a deer? No, but I heard it. You heard me, Sean, you were shooting at me. Hand me your gun, now. I walked Sean down to D and told him we were walking back to the farm. At the farm I pulled his dad aside, so I didn't embarrass Sean in front of everyone. I explained kindly he needed to be supervised, even if the law says he's old enough to hunt by himself. His dad understood and apologized like crazy, but I just wanted it to be a teaching moment. It wasn't until I got home that I realized how truly lucky I was. I don't blame the gun, I blame the negligence of Sean and his father. Since then, Sean has made strides in understanding why that was wrong. It pushed me to teach hunters safety and share my story. To this day I still hunt, and I still mentor new hunters. It's fulfilling knowing new hunters who don't have parents to teach them the right way to do things, safely, can still learn a new skill. TW School Violence. In 2016, I decided to sleep in through my 9 a.m. calc class. At 10 a.m. my building was one of two on the large state university campus to have the fire alarm go off. When standing on the curb, I had this sinking feeling something was wrong. When we were brought inside, we were told the school was now under lockdown due to a terror attack. Turns out the other building with a 10 a.m. fire alarm was the building next to my calculus class. A car drove through the crowd of kids and a guy came out with a machete. We were under lockdown for 9 hours with a lot of misinformation. There was a police chase against our damn parking garage. My friend was locked in a chemistry closet with her class for hours because they were nearby, and I got to sit in my dorm and watch it on the news a 15-minute walk away. Scariest I ever dealt with. Man, side note, I assumed that with the information given that it's simple to figure out where in the US I went to school, but apparently there were 2 machete attacks at universities within like 2 months that year. I have no words. I was walking back to my house in the dark and almost stepped on a copperhead snake while wearing flip-flops. Copperheads are not super venomous or aggressive, but I nearly had a heart attack anyway. On the 3rd day of traveling, arriving as a woman in a tiny, one-street, village in India by bus, during the night, phone is dead, didn't know where to go, voluntary project, people staring at me because they never see tourists there, got picked up by someone on a motorbike. Of course, it turned out the people were super friendly, and I fell in love with India, but everything looked hell different in pitch dark in the middle of nowhere plus me being lost. It was 2 in the morning and my friends and I were walking home from McDonald's when a guy started following us. When we ran, he did too. I was trying to find a witness in a criminal case. The investigator we used couldn't find him, insisting the address we had was wrong and he couldn't find a good one. I got frustrated and went to the address myself. I had spoken with the man a few times, so I thought he wouldn't dodge me. It was in a very bad part of town, and I had just left the courthouse, so I'm sure I screamed cop in the neighborhood. Still, I wanted to find this man, so I didn't care. He lived in a neighborhood that was a bunch of townhouses that were being used as apartments. When I pulled in, I saw a drug deal going down out in the open. Instantly, I saw an older kid, 12 maybe, running to one house, presumably to report my presence. Of course, the address where my witnesses should have been at the very back of this neighborhood with only one way in/out. The parking lot for the complex I needed was blocked by 2 dumpsters. So, I have to park in front of another complex and walk probably 200 plus yards to the unit I needed. When I'm less than 50 feet from the door, a guy walks out from another home, and he's got a Rottweiler on a huge chain leash. I start to ask him if he knows my witness when he unchains the dog and yells, "Sick them Duke. Get him, boy." That dog charges at me with fangs shining. I knew that I couldn't outrun the dog and that it would only activate its chase instinct. So, I stand my ground, couched down in a position where I could protect my neck but still allow me to take a kick at the dog, and prepare for the worst. I'm watching the dog and waiting for my chance to kick it, and hoping I could get a chance to kick it, when it just stops about 10 feet away. It's barking furiously at me and pacing back and forth, almost like it didn't know what to do with me. I slowly back away, never taking my eyes off the dog. The owner gets angry and calls the dog back, so I calmly walk back to my car, even though my legs feel like jelly. When I get back to my car, I notice there's a lot more activity going out than when I came in. I took a moment to survey the situation and decide I've got no choice but to give it a go. I drive normally out of the neighborhood without any other incident. However, the sidewalks and balconies were lined with men and kids holding pistols or displaying pistols in their belt. Never found the witness and frankly didn't care after that experience. Still don't know why the dog just stopped a few feet away from me. Almost got run over by a bunch of 20-somethings on a motorcycle in front of the old folks' home my granddad used to live before he died. They laughed as they rode by. In other news, he was a great man. May he rest in peace. Edit, now that I think of it, those petty things gave me one of the few tangible memories of my grandfather. I guess that moment of fear made it much easier to remember the good times I had with him. I hate to say it, but I guess it ended up being a valuable memory.
When I was in college, the house I lived in was broken into during the night. We didn't realize what happened until the next evening. For details, if anyone is interested, I lived with 3 other girls. My room and another room were upstairs, and we were both asleep the entire night. The other 2 rooms were on the main floor. One girl, S, was out for the night and the other, E, was awake and heard someone trying to get in the side door. He wasn't sure if it was S coming in or not, and luckily, she stayed in her room for a while before stepping out. She didn't hear anything, but after a couple seconds she came out, turned on her flashlight, and heard the bathtub running, in the dark bathroom. He went into the bathroom, turned off the faucet, and heard the front door slam shut. When she looked out of the bathroom, no one was there. She was literally 10 feet from this person the entire time. Fast forward, the next afternoon, E posted a photo of half a brain in our front yard. Considering the location of the house, it wasn't that surprising that some girl lost half her bra, so we all laughed about it. That evening, when I get home from my day, everyone is gathered in the living room, discussing what happened the night before. We realize that someone came in through the unlocked kitchen window, ducked into the bathroom to turn on the tub faucet, and left through the front door. While we're talking, S screams and comes out of her room holding the other half of the bra that he found in the front yard. So, someone broke in, snuck quickly through the house, cut her bra in half, left one half in her drawer, and dropped the other half in the front yard. And it had to be someone who had been to our house before to know the layout in the dark, including not making a sound coming in the window and jumping the bag of Kim returns below the window. We never found out who did it either. I have never felt so unsafe in my life.
Walked into a house to clear a wellness check. Old guy lived alone, and his grandkids, bless them, couldn't get a hold of him for a while, so they called us. Me and my friend got to the house and the front door looked like it was open, so we assumed he was fine, just letting the breeze blow through. The door wasn't open, it had been kicked in and had bullet holes in it. We called the sheriff right away, but he's a long way off, so we got our shotguns and went inside to see if anyone was hurt. The first thing we saw was a large number of casings on the ground and leading up the stairs. I check upstairs and my friend checks the ground floor. I open the master bedroom and there's the old man, stabbed and hanging from the ceiling. As soon as I saw him I backed out and told my friend to book it, duck that. We waited in the truck with our guns pointed at the house. The sheriff rolled up an hour later and walked inside. When he came out he was white as a sheet and sprinted to his car to call it in. 4 weeks, the whole area was covered in yellow tape and investigators. Never got the full story and the sheriff won't tell anyone. Was swimming in a river. The river was a divert going through a pipe, then into an open-air area. After the pipe, it was flat, then flowed down around a 45-degree rock slope. At the top of the slope there was a big metal plate to slow the water going over like this / with the water going over the top lip of the metal. I leaned back against the metal, and when my shoulders passed the water line, it pulled me flat against the metal hard. I couldn't sit back up, the water was shallow enough I could keep my head above water, but just barely. I was definitely terrified briefly. I was able to kind of twist and get out from under the flow, but stayed the hell away from that area after. I was driving on a 4-lane highway and noticed a guy on the other side of the road had his car parked the wrong way on the side. Suddenly he drives across 2 lanes of traffic and into the grass towards me. I could see what he was doing. I quickly get over to the other lane and he almost hits me on the driver's side. I honked at him, but he ignored this. Then this guy tailgates me, passes me up and starts weaving in and out of traffic. Somehow there were no near misses in him hitting someone. About a mile or 2 down the highway is an interchange to get into the interstate. He uses the lane on the interchange to pass someone and then cuts them off at the last minute. In the last several years or so, I've seen more people driving recklessly. This was probably one of the worst that I've ever seen.
I was walking in the woods with a few friends and this man popped out of a trail that not many people knew about, and he had one white eye and a broken beer bottle in his hand. He appeared to be heavily intoxicated, and honestly, if I hadn't have been with other people I fear I would have gotten killed. Was like 14, walking out of gas station and 2 police officers' cars speed in and slam on their brakes just in front of me and jump out guns drawn at a guy in his car. Noped out of there so fast. Was hiking and heard something run up a tree. I look up and it's a head cub. Started backing up and then saw a mama bear looking at me. Luckily, she was drowsy and saw I was leaving, and a well-hiked trail, so she was used people. Still closest, I felt like I was dying. I was 15, and it was Halloween night. My group of friends were all at Elle's house, and we all stayed up late, so late, in fact, they were all starting to fall asleep on the couch. My friend K, another friend T, and myself were all still awake. T is male, and K and I are female. I knew if my mom discovered I stayed the night with a boy, she would be missed, so I knew I had to either leave or find a way to get the boy home. As it turns out, T lived but a few blocks from where we were, so K and I decided to walk T home. This was before any of us were able to drive, and at the hour we were trying to decide all of this, I knew Elle's parents were very much in bed. We ended up walking T home, no problem, and we were walking back to Elle's house. We were still dressed in my Halloween costumes. I used makeup to be an undead soccer player, in one of my soccer uniforms, and Kay was made up as a witch. As we're walking back to Elle's house, no one is on the streets anymore, so we're lollygagging around in the middle of the street, chatting, and taking our time. As we made it down to about halfway back, a jeep full of young men drove past us, and stopped and parked their vehicle. Kay is telling me not to engage in these guys, but I glanced over and at least 2 guys have exited the vehicle. As soon as one of them yells out, "Hey, you," Kay tells me to book it, and we hauled ass through the dark front yards towards Elle's house. I want to thank everything holy that 1, they did not pursue us, and 2, we were in great freaking shape, because we sprinted about 1/2 of a mile back to our friend's house. It was one of the most terrifying experiences I've had in my life, and I am thankful it didn't become something so much worse. Recently, I was visiting my brother in Flagstaff. We were coming back home because it was already getting late, and I had to work the next day. I usually keep feeling I'm being watched by someone, but it's fake most of the time. Well, that wasn't fake at all. I will tell you what happened. Weird guy starts following us. We both get suspicious, but don't want him to know we spotted him. The weird guy starts talking with some weird shot. We both tell him to *CK off. Weird man pulls out knife. We both run like baby when he's escaping the police officers near the end of Baby Driver. The weird guy eventually gives up and leaves us alone. Not gonna lie, but after that I didn't sleep for 2 days. Just this past Saturday. It's 3 in the morning and I'm drunk, half asleep in the back of an Uber. All of a sudden POW, the car had run a red light and T-boned someone turning left. Everyone was fine luckily. I called 911, reported it, and then walked to the nearest gas station in a bad part of town and called another Uber. While I was waiting there, an unmarked car pulled up and the driver leaned out the window and went, "Hey, you need Uber?" "Nah, already got one coming." Uber's hard to get right now. Could be long time. "You want to ride?" No, I'm good." Then he stayed in that spot just staring at me for 10 minutes until the real Uber appeared, then he took off. 2 close brushes with death in one night. I was dating a guy I knew I shouldn't be, and was beginning to suspect he sold more than just weed. He picked me up one Saturday after visiting his dad and told me his visits consisted mainly of smoking meth. We got caught in traffic and he just snapped, started yelling. Sometimes when I'm caught in traffic I just go grab a hunting knife from the middle console, jabs it in the air, screams. He quieted down, then motioned the knife across my stomach as though cutting it open. I foolishly stayed with him another month, then never looked back. When I was like about 13, my sister had a softball tournament out of town, so the whole team went to stay in a hotel. I got in the elevator by myself on the bottom floor and was going up to around the 6th-ish. On the 2nd floor, this older guy got on, smiled at me, and didn't press any buttons. He barely looked at the panel. I don't know why, but I just got this huge wave of unease, and kept thinking, danger, danger, danger. We stopped at the 5th floor. I don't remember anyone getting on, so maybe a kid ding-dong ditched the elevator? It's not important, lol, and I said, "Oops, this is my floor," and jumped out super quick just before the door closed. Used the staircase to run up the rest of the way and told my mom. Turns out the guy was just another parent I didn't recognize. He was staying in a room a few doors down from us. Whoops.
While working in a level 4 all-male correctional facility, the inmates were angry because their dorm was locked down. They were going to be taken off lockdown that day, but my supervisors were dealing with an issue on the other side of the prison. All the inmates started coming out of their locked doors and letting each other out. They were throwing clothes, trash, and food all over the dorm and yelling threats. It was just me in a building with 120 convicted felons. Being high for the second time in my life at midnight and making an illegal U-turn on a highway and not realizing until I was too close that I was on a four-way and 4 lanes of cars were driving toward me at 65 miles per hour. I backed that car up and had to drive in reverse, swerving left and right for like half a mile. I had only had my license for a few months at that point and was such a stupid kid. Last time I ever drove high. A guy was running across a pedestrian walk adjacent to the overpass over Highway 4055, downtown St. Louis, towards me. I was RT in the middle of it. He gasped that guy behind me. "He's gonna kill me." And then he ran by me. This kid 19 to 23 or so was striding in a deliberate way after him. He and I passed one another, and as he walked up I could see his handgun in his left hand, barrel pointing down. I kept my eyes fixed on the gun, not on his face. Learned that going to call in South Central LA, do not look into a stranger's eyes in tough parts of town. He chased the other guy into oncoming traffic on the highway below, shot the guy at least twice. Maybe 3 times, and the victim were hit by a car and flew up in the air. The detective interviewed me. Later a friend who was wired downtown told me. Victim lived. The whole thing was drug-related, and the shooter was the nephew of a city detective. Nothing in the news. 0. This happens on an April Sat at 4 p.m. When I was a kid we figured out how to break into a game farm where there was a big pond to go fishing in, while the way was to go through the storm drain, which wasn't very long and became open air after the fence. So one day we were walking there when the owner or an employee saw the top of our heads popping over the storm drain. They thought we were poachers and started shooting at us. We dropped our stuff and ran back to the drain. I was outside in a Cat 3 hurricane in 110 miles per hour wind, pitch blackness, barely able to stand in the gusts, soaked to the skin, watching the power lines right over my head swing a good 3 feet back and forth in the wind. I was sure the poles would snap any moment and I'd be instantly electrocuted. There were constant blue-green explosions all over town as transformers blew up, and I could hear the roof getting ripped off the neighbor's building and hear debris flying everywhere, but couldn't see anything in the dark. We were out there trying to use ratchet straps to keep our fence from blowing over. It worked, but screw that. Never again. Even when we got inside it was terrifying. You could see the rafters flexing and hear them groaning. I thought the whole roof would peel off. A couple sheets of metal did. And we never found our doormat, only God knows how far that thing flew. I was on the waiting list for school counseling for months, and when I was asked what types of coping mechanisms I use, I said none, because I felt saying that I have bad habits as coping mechanisms, e.g. picking my scalp, that I would have to be talked about my anxiety and stuff without asking me if I wanted or if I felt I needed to do the appointments, or they would say something bad about me and stuff. Even if I knew that they are good people, I can't just trust them. It's not a sense of danger, I just felt I was in an insecure environment with bad people, but for me it's kind of similar.
Thanks for watching. Please comment, like, share and subscribe. The Internet Surfer on YouTube for more horror and scary stories.